Hollywood loves to tell stories about heroes, villains, and world-ending stakes. But what happens when the drama is behind the camera? Enter The Studio, a show that somehow turns the chaos of making movies into one of the most brutally honest and hilarious things on TV. It's a series about Hollywood nonsense that somehow isn't nonsense itself. How did a story about frustrated creatives, clueless execs, and film industry burnouts turn into a hit? That's exactly what we're unpacking today. Let's dive into the making of The Studio, a show about how movies get made, or more accurately, how they barely survive the process. The conception. Why make fun of Hollywood? This all started with Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, two guys who've been in the trenches of Hollywood long enough to know just how chaotic, contradictory, and downright bizarre the system can be. Between the green lights that turn into dead ends, the rewrites that undo entire scripts, and the notes that say, make it more emotional, right after cut that emotional scene, they've seen it all. For them, The Studio wasn't just a comedy idea, it was therapy. Years of watching genuinely great ideas get chopped up, watered down, or suffocated entirely by the process lit the fuse. And the pitch practically wrote itself. What if we made a show that captures how maddening and unintentionally hilarious this world really is? And it's not just inspired by the chaos, it is chaos. One scene where a studio exec breaks down crying after winning a Golden Globe and gets told, hey, it's literally our job to ruin movies, is based on real events experienced by Seth Rogen. Not an exaggeration, not a metaphor, real life. And naturally, it ended up in the show because how could it not? At its heart, The Studio is built around one of Hollywood's oldest and most uncomfortable truths, the war between art and commerce. It's a constant tug-of-war between the people trying to make something meaningful and the machine trying to make something bankable. And in that push and pull, there's a whole lot of comedy, anxiety, and the occasional identity crisis. The writing process, making it painfully real. Writing The Studio meant threading an impossibly thin needle. It had to be sharp without being cruel, satirical but not smug. It needed to roast the film industry while still showing why people care enough to stick around and fight for it. The writer's room wasn't just packed with cynics tossing around punchlines, it was filled with people who genuinely love movies. People who've stayed up rewriting scenes at 3 a.m., who've sat through conflicting studio notes delivered with total confidence, who've had passion projects dangled in front of them and yanked away just as fast. They didn't want to flatten the industry into heroes and villains, they wanted to show the messy middle, the executives trying to justify their jobs, the creatives trying to hang on to a vision, and everyone else just trying to not get steamrolled. That's why The Studio hits as hard as it does. It doesn't just mock the chaos, it understands it. It's not written from the outside looking in. It's written by people who've been chewed up by the machine, spit out, and somehow keep coming back. Not because they're gluttons for punishment, okay, maybe a little, but because there's still something magical buried in all that madness. Production challenges, the long take life. Now, let's talk about the boldest creative gamble The Studio takes, its visual style. Most comedies lean on quick edits, punchy reaction shots, and rhythm you can control in post. The Studio throws all that out the window. Instead, long takes. Uncomfortably long takes, entire scenes play out in real time. Shot with a single camera that floats, pivots, and presses in as the tension builds. No cuts, no safety net, just pure live wire momentum. Why? Because the goal wasn't just to show the chaos of Hollywood, it was to trap you in it. The camera becomes a nervous intern, constantly circling, listening in, trying to keep up as deals are made, dreams are crushed, and egos quietly combust. You feel the panic, the desperation, the claustrophobia of 1,000 meetings and 15 scripts that need fixing by Friday. But pulling that off? Not easy. The pressure on actors was insane. Hit every line, every cue, every mark, because one blown moment 5 minutes in meant restarting the entire take. And the camera crew, choreographed like dancers, dodging furniture and finding light on the fly. One missed step, back to one. As one of the producers joked, even Scorsese had to use more than one camera. And he wasn't wrong. This wasn't just a stylistic flex, it was a logistical marathon. The kind of choice that made every day on set feel like walking a creative tightrope, with no net, and $1 million schedule breathing down your neck. Character development, the relatable anxiety. Even with all the satire, the studio lands because its characters don't feel like caricatures. They feel like people. Messy, overworked, quietly spiraling people. And at the center of it all is Matt, an anxious, soft-spoken executive doing his best to navigate an industry that seems designed to crush exactly the kind of passion he still believes in. Matt isn't your typical satire lead. He's not the scheming villain. He's not the idealistic hero either. He's just stuck. Trapped between creatives who want to change the world and higher-ups who want safer margins. He's the guy who grew up loving movies, only to find himself stuck in endless meetings about test screenings and marketing notes, slowly wondering if he's become part of the problem. And that's what makes him hit so hard. He's not absurd, he's familiar. Across the board, the characters in the studio carry that same tension. They're ambitious, burned out, hungry for validation, yet constantly compromising, negotiating, trying to protect their spark without getting fired or flattened. The writers didn't just create archetypes, they built human beings shaped by fear, hope, and an inbox full of contradictory notes. That's the magic of the show. It's cynical, yes, but never hollow. It laughs at the system, but never forgets the people inside it. And that balance between brutal honesty and real empathy, that's where the studio stops being just a smart comedy and becomes something genuinely special. Themes and inspiration, more than just laughs. Yes, the studio is funny, brutally funny. It nails the awkward silences, the performative pitches, the soul-sucking conference calls where no one really says what they mean. But underneath all the sharp lines and punchy dialogue, there's a quieter, deeper ache, the absurd, exhausting difficulty of trying to make something good in an industry that's increasingly optimized for everything but that. The show doesn't just roast Hollywood, it dissects it. It asks the uncomfortable question at the heart of so many creative breakdowns. Why is it so hard to make something meaningful? Even when you've got the money, the talent, the backing, why does it feel like every good idea has to survive 1,000 small compromises just to make it out alive? There are echoes of the Larry Sanders Show extras, even The Player in its DNA. But the studio isn't just riffing on past industry satire. It's tuned into now, a moment where creative decisions are being shaped by streaming algorithms, franchise mandates, quarterly earnings reports, and social media metrics. The pressures are louder, faster, more confusing than ever, and the show captures that chaos without flinching. What it ultimately offers is a kind of love-hate letter to the business, a portrait of an industry full of people who are exhausted, frustrated, occasionally cynical, and still showing up every day. Because in spite of it all, they still care. They still want to make something great. And maybe that's the biggest joke of all, but it's also what gives the show its heart. So why did the studio land the way it did? Because it told the truth, just not in a way that pats itself on the back for doing it. There are no long-winded monologues or self-important speeches here. Instead, the show deals in painfully precise moments. A forced smile in a pitch meeting, a passive-aggressive email chain, a career-defining decision made over cold coffee and corporate jargon. It's the kind of truth that sneaks up on you because it feels way too familiar, especially for anyone who's ever tried to make something creative inside a system built to sell it. That's what gave the studio its edge, but also, oddly, its heart. It resonated with both audiences and insiders. People laughed, sure, but they also winced. Because behind the satire was a quiet acknowledgement of how tough and weirdly noble it is to try and make something real in an industry that often rewards the opposite, and maybe that's the best irony of all. Here's a show that started as a dark comedy about how impossible it is to make good television, and somehow ended up making some of the best television of the year. Not in spite of its subject, but because of it. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more insights into your favorite shows and movies. See you on the next one!